Längenbühl, a quiet and underrated destination in Switzerland. Away from the busy tourist destinations, this small countryside village reveals a much calmer and more authentic side of Switzerland. Away from the famous tourist routes, Längenbühl reveals a calmer and more authentic side of the Swiss countryside. At Grizzly Bear Längenbühl, the terrace opens onto a beautiful landscape of rolling farmland, green pastures, and distant hills. Cows can be seen grazing across the fields, adding to the peaceful rural character of the surroundings. Beyond the terrace, a walk through the nearby countryside reveals even more. Traditional farmhouses, quiet country roads, goats, horses, and even llamas living among the open fields. As evening approaches, the character of Längenbühl slowly begins to change. The sunlight becomes softer, long shadows stretch across the farmland, and the landscape takes on the warm colors of sunset. It is a quiet corner of Switzerland where an ordinary evening becomes part of the experience. The green pastures surrounding Längenbühl are more than just part of its beautiful scenery. They reflect a farming tradition that has shaped this landscape for generations. Cattle and grassland have long been closely connected with life in this part of the Bernese countryside. Even some of the old local place names provide clues to this agricultural past. Names associated with calves, oxen, and grazing land can still be traced through the history of the area. The early settlers here practiced traditional forms of agriculture, including the three-field farming system, where land was carefully rotated between different crops and periods of recovery. Over time, grassland and cattle became an increasingly important part of farming across the Bern region. Meadows provided fresh grazing during the warmer months, and when cut and dried, the hay needed to feed livestock through the colder Swiss winters. That relationship between the land and the animals is still clearly visible today. Across Längenbühl, cows grazing quietly in the open fields are not simply a picture postcard image of Switzerland. They are part of a rural landscape that has been shaped by agriculture for centuries. And during an evening walk through these fields, that farming heritage can still be seen everywhere. In the carefully maintained meadows, the farmhouses, the grazing cattle, and the peaceful countryside that gives Längenbühl its distinctive character. Continuing through the countryside, Längenbühl begins to reveal another side of its character. The paths lead between open farmland and gently rolling green fields, where horses graze quietly in the evening light. Goats wander close to the farms, while the surrounding meadows stretch across the landscape almost without interruption. This peaceful scenery has been shaped over thousands of years. Long before these fields became farmland, glaciers moved through this region, shaping the landscape and leaving behind the gentle hills that can still be seen today. As the glaciers eventually retreated, they also left a number of small lakes scattered across the surrounding countryside. And human history here reaches surprisingly far back. Archaeological discoveries around Längenbühl indicate that people were already living in this area during the Iron Age, more than 2,000 years ago. Over the centuries, small settlements developed among these hills, and farming gradually became part of the identity of the region. That connection with the land is still easy to recognize today. Walking between these farms, horses and goats are part of the everyday landscape. The fields are carefully maintained, farmhouses are scattered between the meadows, and much of the surrounding land continues to be used for agriculture. In fact, even today, more than 2/3 of the municipality of Forst Längenbühl is agricultural land. But as the day begins to come to an end, the landscape starts to feel different. The afternoon brightness slowly disappears. The sunlight becomes warmer, touching the grass, the farmhouses, and the animals with a soft golden color. Horses continue grazing quietly in the fields, goats wander around their enclosures, and across the farmland, the long shadows of evening begin to stretch further and further. There is something particularly beautiful about sunset in a place like Längenbühl. There are no tall buildings to block the horizon, and very little to interrupt the view.
frame നോക്കിയേ കാണോ?
Instead, the open farmland allows the changing colors of the sky to become part of the entire landscape. Green slowly turns to gold, the distant hills begin to darken, and for a few moments, the countryside seems almost completely still. It is also a reminder that the beauty of Switzerland isn't found only among its famous mountains, lakes, and tourist villages. Sometimes it can be found along a small countryside road, between a farmhouse and an open field, watching horses grazing beneath the evening sky, or hearing the distant sounds of animals as another day on the farm comes to an end. And perhaps this is what makes Längenbühl so special. It doesn't feel like a place created for tourism, it feels lived in. The farms, the animals, the meadows, and the small roads are all part of everyday life here. And when the final sunlight begins to disappear beyond the horizon, all of these simple elements come together to create one of the most memorable scenes of the evening. A quiet walk through the farmland, horses and goats along the way, and a beautiful sunset, bringing another peaceful day in Längenbühl to an end.